What's up, you guys? It's Graham here. So right off the bat, I just want to say this is not going to be my usual video because I've just hit my limit. It is clear the housing market is failing practically everybody, and something needs to be done because it's only getting worse. Look, if it wasn't clear from the title, I'm talking about home prices, the entire housing market, and why it's now literally impossible to build anything that's even remotely affordable. In fact, it's not just your imagination. Some states have made it so difficult to build that developers are now either canceling projects entirely or forced to create luxury units because renting at $4,500 a month for a one-bedroom is the only way they won't lose money. That's why I'm going to break down exactly what's actually going on, my own experience building in a state like California, and why home prices will only continue getting more expensive if we don't get together and demand a change. Because believe it or not, this is a very solvable problem if we talk about the one thing that everybody misses. And no, it's not hitting the like button and subscribing if you haven't done that already, even though that does help out the channel tremendously. Thank you so much for doing that, and also a big thank you to Policy Genius for sponsoring this video, but more on that later. Alright, so to start, quite a few people have sent me this video by Tucker Carlson talking about why young home buyers are now completely screwed out of the housing market. I'll link to his video down below in the description, but for anyone curious, his argument is that we basically face a combination of factors, like Wall Street buying homes, rising consumer debt, immigration, higher interest rates, and less development, all fusing together at the exact same time to create this environment where now housing is practically out of reach for everybody. However, even though all of that sounds like a reasonable explanation, it's not the reason that home prices are actually getting more expensive. So let's clear up the misconception, and I'll tell you what's really going on, because it's probably going to piss you off. Let's first talk about home prices. Here's the thing. Most people look at home prices today and compare them with what they used to cost back in the 1950s. And yeah, on the surface, it is insane just how expensive everything has become. Like back then, the median home price was just $7,300, which is about $89,000 adjusted for inflation. Today, that median price is more like $430,000. On top of that, what's even more crazy is that if you wanted to buy a house in the 1950s, that was equivalent to roughly 3 years worth of your paycheck. Whereas today, that same house is going to cost anywhere from 7 to 10 times your annual salary, or even more if you're in a state like California. So why is that? Is it greedy developers? Is it Wall Street buying homes? Is it immigration? Well, here's the thing that news outlets all get wrong, and we'll start with building. See, back in the 1950s, land was plentiful, it was cheap, and developers found new ways to manufacture mass-produced subdivisions at scale so that they could quickly build them as fast as they could sell them. But back then, there was one big difference, or I guess I should say a small difference. The homes they built were very tiny. Like, keep in mind, since these developers subdivided lots as small as they could possibly get away with, the average home they built was just 983 square feet. Air conditioning was not something that was standard. A house was really just the bare minimum, which consisted of 2 to 3 bedrooms, 1 single bathroom, a living room, a kitchen. That's it. Now today, on the other hand, the average starter home is more like 2,700 square feet. It contains multiple bathrooms, an attached garage, energy-efficient windows, central heating and cooling. Basically, everything that used to be considered a luxury is now the bare minimum standard that a buyer is willing to get. And of course, that means that the price is going to be higher. So are developers to blame? Are they the ones responsible for higher prices? Well, oddly enough, not really. As it turned out, throughout the 1970s, cultural demand shifted away from smaller homes and into properties that people would be able to grow into. As proof of this, in the 1980s, about 40% of homes were considered entry-level, whereas today, only 9% of homes fall into that category. Plus, there is one more item that really makes the biggest difference, and that would be land. On the surface, the US population has more than doubled since the 1950s, and the majority of that growth is concentrated within a small number of metropolitan areas that everyone wants to move into. This meant that what used to be cheap and abundant is now completely developed. Land prices started to go higher, and that needs to be factored into the cost of building a property. From there, you should add on the buyer's new expectations of luxury amenities like air conditioning, a 2-car garage, a second story, more bathrooms, double-paned windows. Combine that with the rising cost of labor, and pretty soon, what used to be a 950 square foot bungalow has turned into a 3,000 square foot McMansion at the edge of town that everyone wants to move into. Although the real supervillain in all of this is simply zoning. As anyone who's ever tried building a home will tell you, Government regulation for housing has gotten completely out of control, but it's not exactly for the reasons you think, even though it's completely ruining your chances of owning a home. For instance, the National Association of Home Builders estimates that, on average, government regulation accounts for nearly 25% of the price of a new single-family home, and an even more staggering 40% of the cost of a new multifamily development. On top of that, many of those development costs are flat fees, or barely tied to the size of the project, so going and buying the land, pulling permits, running utility lines, and paying regulatory fees don't drop proportionally if the house is smaller. So this creates an incentive to build as big as you possibly can, because you're going to spend $100,000 either way if you build a 900 square foot bungalow or a 5,000 square foot McMansion. Like, just take a look at Minneapolis. Builders said that they found it effectively impossible to construct homes in the $150,000 to $250,000 price range. And one analysis showed that a house costing $182,000 in labor and materials ends up with an all-in cost of $372,000 after you add in $56,000 in various government fees and administrative costs. Or if you want to know how this gets even crazier, this next example is so ridiculous that it sounds like I'm making it up. Although before we go into that, here's what's wild. Even though everything is getting way more expensive, there are still things out there that you would be able to get way cheaper just by shopping around. Like, I realized that I was being massively overcharged on one of my insurance policies, and as soon as I shopped around, I realized that this applies to so much more than most people think. For instance, half of Americans don't even have life insurance, and of those that do, 42% say that they need more than what their current policy offers. That is why our sponsor, Policy Genius, is there to help. They make securing your future and protecting what you've built easier and way more affordable than you'd ever expect by allowing you to compare life insurance quotes from America's top insurers in one place with just a few clicks to find your lowest price. In fact, with Policy Genius, real users have gotten 20-year, $2 million life insurance policies for just $53 a month, with thousands of 5-star reviews on Google and Trustpilot. Plus, for those of you who don't even know where to start, their team of licensed, award-winning agents can walk you through the entire process step by step, handle all the paperwork, answer any questions you have, and help you make decisions with confidence. Not to mention, they work for you and not the insurance companies, so they don't have any incentive to recommend one insurer over the other. So don't wait until the end of the year. Give your family the gift of security with Policy Genius today. Just visit policygenius.com/Graham or click the link down below in the description to get your free life insurance quotes from top companies and see how much you could save. Again, that link is down below in the description to get started. Thank you so much, and now let's get back to the video. Alright, now in terms of home prices, zoning, and the worst housing shortage from the entire United States, let's talk about California. See, in many large California cities, a lot of the zoning requirement is dictated by parking. So if you want to go and build a brand new 600 square foot unit, you also have to supply an additional 300 square feet for that resident to park their car. If they wind up building that parking on ground level, that takes away from the space that they could be using just to build another unit. But if they go below ground, that costs a lot of money. So either way, that needs to be figured into the cost of the overall unit and eventually the price that you pay. This also isn't including all the other requirements like a minimum lot size, a minimum amount of open planted space, or a minimum amount of common space. And all of a sudden, building a 600 square foot apartment is now costing you the equivalent of building 1,100 square feet with everything else that you have to add on to it. And of course, they have to charge like you're buying or renting 1,100 square feet. You also have this completely backwards permit system that creates indefinite delays, where to run plumbing, you have to get a permit for that. But before you could get that permit, you have to go to a different department to get a permit to dig a trench. But to get that permit, you have to go to a different department to be able to start the work after an environmental review. Oh, and you also risk getting denied for a permit at every single step, at which point you have to resubmit and start over again from the back of the line. Even for me, I spent over $200,000 building out a 720 square foot unit. I paid over $10,000 in city fees and permit filings. But then they charged me another $20,000 to fix a sewer line, which required me to go and get a permit from urban forestry to trim the city-owned tree roots. But the tree turned out to be diseased, so I had to get another permit to be able to remove the tree, and another permit to be able to replace that tree with another tree. You can't even make this up. Getting these permits, by the way, could take hours, days, weeks, months. You have no idea. they could be denied at any point where you have to start the process over again. And at the same time as this, you have workers who are sitting around doing nothing. You have overhead piling up, and you have the uncertainty that you're never able to get the job done because no one's communicating with each other and you haven't heard back in weeks. Basically, overregulation has completely stopped all development. Higher land prices make smaller projects just unfeasible. The push for larger homes really incentivizes builders to create as much square footage as they possibly can. More people would rather live in Los Angeles than in any other area where home prices are actually selling for $120,000. And when you combine all of this together, it's really the young first-time home buyer that gets completely screwed out of ever owning a home. But what about Wall Street buying homes? I've said this before, but the Wall Street buying homes narrative really seems to have started with this Twitter thread, which made the claim that BlackRock is buying every single family house they could find, paying 20 to 50% above asking price, and outbidding normal home buyers. However, when you actually go and investigate these unsourced claims, as it turns out, that was referencing a purpose-built rental community built by D.R. Horton that was never meant to be for sale individually ever to begin with. But okay, fine, that's just one case. What about everything else? Well, in 2022, 3, 4, and 5, there was the headline that investors are buying nearly 1 in 4 homes, most in all cash deals. Again, by the sound of it, this seems absolutely absurd. This has got to be responsible for pushing up home prices. This should not be allowed. Except again, when you look at the real numbers, this is actually lower than it was back in 2004, 5, and even 2011. Second, the term investor is also extremely broad to the point where it encompasses someone buying their first rental property, to a grandma renting out a home she can no longer afford, to a huge conglomerate who just closed on a 1,000-unit subdivision. So let's break it down even further. Of the roughly 26% of homes that get sold to investors, more than half of those are mom and pop investors. And even of those half, only 12% are mega corporations. This means when you go and buy a house, 75% of your competition is other owner users. 25% are going to be investors, and of those 25%, 2.8% own more than 1,000 units. CoreLogic also found that in 2021, less than 3% of all homes were sold to large investors, and in almost all of those cases, those large investors were funded by everyday people who had their money invested from pensions, retirement funds, 401ks, and so on. Americans for Financial Reform also found that by mid-2022, private equity only accounted for 3.6% of all apartments and 1.6% of all rental homes. That is it. This means that the impact Wall Street has on home buyers is pretty much a rounding error. They do not care about Sally and Joe making their first offer on a $400,000 home that could rent for $1,500 a month. It's just bad business for them. Wall Street is really just seen as the scapegoat to a much bigger issue, which I would like to call the perfect storm of BS. The way I see it, based on all the numbers from verified sources, the real reason that housing is so unaffordable is simply due to a combination of prior artificially low interest rates that's led to locked-in sellers who don't want to move, restrictive zoning that makes it impossible to add more inventory onto the market, overregulation to the point where no one wants to build, sky-high consumer debt that keeps people bogged down, and a surplus of demand from everyday home buyers who simply believe that buying a house is the American dream. That's it. If you want anyone to blame for this, it's probably just your local city council, state legislation, and maybe the person in charge of issuing permits and inspections. Real talk, the problem here is that a lot of these rules were initially passed with good intentions to make sure that people don't cut corners. But then what happens is that a few years later, someone else says, hey, we gotta pass this thing because that happens. Fine. A few years later, though, someone else says, oh, but in that case, we gotta do this too. Fine. And then decades upon decades upon decades of one thing stacking on top of another until eventually nothing gets done and you have to pull a permit to be able to plant a tree. Now sure, backing up for a moment, we can say that some investors in some situations do compete with owner users. But I gotta say, as a former investor myself, competing with anyone who wants to move in the home themselves is just really bad business. Like as an investor, you need to make a profit, and that usually means You don't compete with someone who's willing to move in themselves. You compete with other investors because the property you want to buy needs so much work that no one else is going to touch it. These are typically the homes that require large renovations, floor plan adjustments, ripping out kitchens and bathrooms, and spending 4 to 8 months just to make it livable. The fact is, from my experience, so few properties make sense to buy or renovate to begin with that it's maybe only about 3% of the entire market. And of that 3%, you're just competing with other investors, not the end user. The same applies also with the concept of immigration. The truth is, this only applies in very specific areas, and even then, it was found that this only contributes to about 3 to 5% of a home's price growth, while the other 95 to 97% of a home's appreciation comes from every other factor that I've listed here. That's why, in terms of what we could actually do about this, here's my take. First, streamline permits and cut red tape. There should never be any confusion from one inspector to another. It shouldn't take 6 to 12 months just to get your electricity turned on. It shouldn't cost money when developers are adding a lot of time and resources into a city. And when time is money, anything that creates delays just makes the entire project more expensive for the average person. 2, we gotta reduce excessive fees. Look, it shouldn't cost a $500 permit fee and a 30-day wait just to install a bathroom light. I'm exaggerating a little bit, but the fees are just atrocious. And usually what ends up happening is that people go without the permits and just do unpermitted work that's usually not as good because the permitting process is just so broken. And it ends up hurting. People pull less permits because of how difficult it is. Third, I think modular housing should make a comeback. I know it's not as popular, but we have to come to the reality that housing is never going to look the same or cost the same as it did back in the 1950s because land is just so much more expensive and everyone wants to be in the same few areas. I just think smaller, modular homes make the most sense without parking requirements and just let people walk. Like, look at Austin. They helped streamline a lot of the process, got rid of a lot of the red tape, and their home prices are down 20% from peak. And fourth, we need to give tax incentives to builders. Look, the city could barely issue a permit. They should not be in charge of building houses, so we should incentivize developers who are really adding time, resources, money, and creating jobs for a lot of people. I just think if there's no incentive for them to build, they're not going to build anyway, so we may as well get something than nothing. Trust me, all of this that I've mentioned will make a massive difference, and if anyone's watching this who actually has the power to look into some of these things, please take them into consideration and let me know your thoughts down below in the comment section, because maybe in the future, we could actually make housing affordable again. So thank you so much for watching. If you agree with this, just hit the like button, subscribe if you haven't done that already, and don't forget, check out Policy Genius down below in the description. I would highly recommend them, and now is the time to do this before the end of the year. Enjoy, thanks so much, and until next time.